Is there a place in time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere at some time along an infinite line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Join us on a journey into the improbable.
Today's story, Episode 273, The Mendela Effect, read by Kathleen Connolly. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. Somewhere and sometime, history might have been changed to alter the present.
Alessia stood at the back of the small crowd around the modest cenotaph at the center of the newly rebuilt plaza, as Rosoli's current mayor concluded her remarks. Let us stand in silence for a moment to honor and remember those who died in the conflagration that consumed most of our beloved town on this day 25 years ago, the mayor concluded. In her mid-50s, dressed respectfully in black, she clasped her hands and bowed her head. As the group stood in silence, Alessia could hear the rumble of traffic from the nearby busy autostrada. She couldn't remember when the road, which had once run through the center of the town, had been moved, but it was some years after the accident. The ceremony ended with the mayor laying a wreath. Then the crowd began to break into smaller groups to talk. Alessia didn't know anyone, and soon found herself standing alone. She hadn't returned to Italy or her grandmother's town since she was a child. She had an uncle still living in the area, but he had chosen not to come, and she hadn't seen him in decades as her mother hadn't gotten along with him. She never understood their estrangement. Now it seemed pointless after her mother's death. There was only her and her uncle left. Having traveled thousands of miles to attend and not wanting to leave yet, Alessia made her way over to the cenotaph to look for her grandmother's name etched into the stone, then moved on to the commemorative plaque. The bronze rectangle featured before and after photos etched onto its surface, and below them a description of the tragedy, which had seen the center of the town burn down, killing dozens of people either in the fire itself or, like her grandmother later, from burns and other injuries. Following the date, the plaque authoritatively stated, "At precisely 2:35 p.m., a catastrophic collision occurred within the heart of our town center, when two transport vehicles, laden with highly volatile lithium-ion batteries destined for electric vehicular propulsion, collided head-on. The batteries were torn apart in the wake of this cataclysmic impact, resulting in a ferocious conflagration that rapidly consumed the surrounding vicinity. In the face of this inferno, our local first responders found themselves confronting a maelstrom of unparalleled proportions. Their valiant efforts rendered ineffectual against the relentless advance of the chemical blaze. Tragically, the merciless flames claimed the lives of no fewer than 47 individuals, leaving behind a trail of indescribable devastation. The repercussions of this calamity were far-reaching, precipitating a seismic shift in national policy. In response to the gravity of the incident, our federal government made history by becoming the pioneering nation to enact a sweeping prohibition on electric battery-powered vehicles. This watershed decision reverberated across the international stage, as numerous nations swiftly followed suit to avert such harrowing calamities in their territories. "That's not how I remember it," Alessia muttered. "What do you think happened then?" someone said in American English. The question startled Alessia. She had barely whispered the comment. She turned toward the voice and found a striking older woman dressed in dark gray. Like Alessia, she was North American. "You said you didn't remember it that way," the woman reminded. "I didn't mean to say that out loud," Alessia apologized. "So what do you think was different?" "It's the trucks that crashed. I'm sure they were carrying gasoline." "Interesting. Why?" "My grandmother survived the fire but was badly injured," Alessia explained defensively. "My mother and I flew here to see her in hospital. I was only 6 or 7, but I distinctly remember her telling me they were fuel trucks. She died of her injuries shortly after." "My condolences," the woman offered. "The accident became such a watershed moment that I'm sure the plaque is correct. You were young, you must be misremembering. Our memories can play tricks on us, especially old ones. Details get mixed up. You might have seen a tanker truck on the way to the hospital, and your brain has, over the years, merged the memories. You see, the brain stores memories in 2 ways. Newer ones tend to be verbatim. Older ones are just basic concepts like you saw your grandmother in hospital. The specifics of that moment are not remembered, so we tend to embellish the recollection with details from other experiences. Everyone does this, especially if it is an early memory. Are you some kind of psychologist? Alessia asked, getting annoyed. It's common knowledge, the woman retorted in a way which implied her word was final. It made Alessia uncomfortable. Not wanting to get into an argument, Alessia excused herself, turned and left, but she could sense the stranger's gaze burning into her back. Alessia found the whole encounter a bit creepy. She was sure her memory was correct. The plaque had to be wrong. She wanted to talk to someone about it, but didn't feel comfortable approaching the mayor or anyone involved with the memorial. She could only think of one person to talk to, her uncle, who lived in the next town, although she hadn't seen him for over 2 decades. I almost didn't recognize you, Federico, Alessia's uncle, admitted, kissing her on each cheek a few hours later before standing back to look. You were only 8 or 9 when I saw you last. You've changed so much. I'm glad you came to see me. I wasn't sure if you would when you told me you were coming for the 25th. I assumed you would be there, Alessia protested, waiting in the doorway for her uncle to invite her in. She wasn't sure how he'd react, but the aging man, to her relief, seemed genuinely happy to see her. Come in, he beckoned. I went to the annual memorial for almost 20 years, such a tragedy. Then I stopped. I mean, no disrespect, but it was time to move on. I don't like to dwell on the past. Going this year would have reminded me of things I would prefer not to think about. I know we didn't get along, your mother, grandmother, and me, but that was then, and now you are here. I'm so happy to see you. Please sit. The room was surprisingly modern and bright. Alessia had been expecting something old and tired-looking. She sat in one of the comfortable armchairs positioned to make conversation easy. Federico offered her a glass of wine, then sat down opposite her. So tell me what you have been doing, he asked. It took almost an hour for Alessia to quell her uncle's curiosity. Finally, she had a chance to ask him about Rosoli. Did Grandma ever mention anything about the type of trucks involved in the disaster? I saw her several times while in the hospital, Federico said. We both knew her time was limited, so we spent it trying to patch things up. We didn't talk about the accident. That's an odd question. Why do you ask? I remember quite clearly that she told me she saw 2 tanker trucks racing through the town just before they collided, Alessia explained. But the plaque on the cenotaph claims the trucks which caused the fire were carrying EV batteries to the car factory. An odd woman there heard me mutter that and was quite adamant I was misremembering things. I was hoping Grandma had said something to you. Federico shook his head. No, she didn't. And my mother didn't mention anything about Grandma knowing the type of truck which caused the fire? Her uncle shook his head again. No, we never talked about it, and I haven't seen your mother since you and she visited a few years after the accident. I remember that trip, Alessia admitted. We flew into Florence and rented an electric car at the airport. Mom got lost and was freaking out about our battery level until we stumbled on a small charge station. Federico looked confused. You mean petrol station, he corrected. Battery-powered cars had been banned by then because of the fear of another Rosoli. You would have driven here in a gas-powered car, he insisted. Are you sure about that? Alessia challenged. I swear I remember watching the battery level indicator because Mum was so worried we'd run out of power. You were young and old memories are fuzzy, Federico consoled. Sometimes we add things to recollections that weren't originally there. Maybe you were watching your tablet's battery indicator, and your mother was worried about running out of gas. Your brain just remembers her concern and filled in the detail with the battery indicator over the years. That's sort of the same thing the woman at the cenotaph was implying, Alessia growled, looking accusingly at her uncle. My memory is perfectly clear. I know I'm right. We were in an EV and Grandma saw fuel trucks before the accident. You're as stubborn as your mother and grandmother, Alessia, Federico noted. So I'm not going to try and convince you. However, I suggest you go to the regional archives in Frabina. They'll have the original reports on the disaster. I have a friend who works there. I can let her know you're coming. The archives were in a restored medieval stone building in the old regional capital's triangular central plaza. Anticipating staying for a few days, Alessia rented a room nearby and a motor scooter to get around. Federico's friend turned out to be the associate archivist who was more than willing to help Alessia track down the official reports, news stories, and photos of the village before and after the accident. Oddly, there were no photos of the trucks involved or even a mention of what they were hauling in the news articles immediately after the tragedy. Even more unusual, Alessia thought, the official report just referred to the cause of the disaster as a collision and recommended routing the autostrada around the town. It wasn't until the first calls started coming out to ban dangerously explosive batteries that the truck's cargo began to be identified as such. "Are these all the reports?" Alessia asked after having spent 2 days combing through thousands of digital files. "That's everything we have. All the reports and articles in the regional and national papers," the archivist confirmed. "I take it you didn't find what you were looking for?" "No," Alessia shook her head. "I didn't. I hoped there would be a description of the trucks involved in the Rosoli disaster." "They were transports carrying batteries. That's common knowledge," the archivist replied without hesitation. When Alessia pointed out that the reports immediately after the disaster didn't mention what the trucks had been carrying, the archivist just shrugged it off, then added that someone else had recently been interested in the same thing. "I think his first name was Angelo or Antonio or something similar. I believe he lives in the region," she said, but couldn't recall anything more about him or what he had discovered. Defeated, Alessia thanked the archivist and left. She walked the half-block back to her scooter and was about to get on it when someone behind her spoke, startling her. "Nice scooter. Personally, I'm not brave enough to ride one on these crowded, narrow roads." Alessia couldn't quite place the voice. It was American, and she had heard it recently. But where? She finished buckling her helmet, then swung around to see who was trying to talk to her. The creepy woman from the cenotaph stood a few feet away, watching her with more than casual interest. She was dressed in trendy tourist attire, which, in Alessia's opinion, appeared to be more of a disguise than an affectation. "I'm here visiting relatives," the woman explained with a forced smile that didn't reach past the ends of her lips. "What brings you to Frabinia?" "It's a bit off the beaten path for tourists." "I came to visit the archives," Alessia replied, "and my uncle has friends here," she added, hoping to head off any other questions. "Are you a medieval history buff or interested in more recent events, like the Rosoli incident?" the woman probed with a knowing predatory smirk. Alessia's cheeks began to turn red. The strange woman had an uncanny ability to get under her skin. "Family history, and why is it any business of yours?" she spat back defiantly. "You know you won't find anything to prove your memory is right," the woman countered, her veneer of pleasantness gone. "You should drop it and enjoy the rest of your trip. It might be another 22 years before you make it back here." Alessia didn't answer. Instead, she started the scooter and drove away in the opposite direction from her hotel. She tried to convince herself that it was just a lucky guess. The woman couldn't have known it had been exactly 22 years since she and her mother had visited her uncle. Alessia drove around until she thought the woman wouldn't be able to find her, then doubled back to the hotel and parked the scooter where it would be hard to spot from the road, just in case the creepy woman was following her. Why did the woman care about what some other attendee remembered? If the woman thought she was discouraging Alessia, she was wrong. Her uncle was right. She was as single-minded as her mother and was going to dig until she proved she was right. Alessia decided that spending any more time at the archives was pointless. So she ordered room service, stayed in and searched the web looking for other incidents of people's memories not agreeing with historical records. It didn't take long to find dozens of groups, including one devoted to the Rosoli accident. She was relieved to discover people worldwide who remembered reading news articles or seeing videos about the Rosoli disaster, which clearly stated 2 fuel tankers collided head-on and burst open on impact, their trailers spilling thousands of liters of gasoline into the street that caught fire and destroyed the center of the town. However, no one could find any of the reports supporting this. Hoping someone could help, Alessia posted her story in the Rosoli disaster forum, then went to sleep. When she woke and checked her laptop the following day, a person calling himself Veritas42 had responded. "I agree digital records are easy to change, and I believe they have been," the message began. I'm convinced this is evidence of time travel, someone from our future attempting to alter the course of the world. They changed the critical details of a pivotal moment. That's all it would take, but not all the evidence of the original timeline is erased, so they send people back to clean up and get rid of the inconvenient bits and pieces that don't agree with the new timeline they've created. Maybe your mysterious stranger is one of them. I'd be careful. Alessia laughed. Time travel? Give me a break, she muttered, and was about to move on when she saw another message from Veritas 42. Curious, she opened it expecting a rant on time travel, aliens, or alternate dimensions. Instead, she found something entirely unexpected. Reading my first response to your post, I think I came across as a bit flaky. I was excited that someone else witnessed one of the people directly involved in the Rosoli incident saying the trucks carried petrol. My name is Angelo and I live in a small village called Stalis, about a 45-minute drive from where you are. I visited the archive as well and, like you, found nothing. My father was part of the first EMS crew on site after the accident. He told me the trucks were tankers. Before he passed away last year, he gave me a video on his phone proving it. It might be the last bit of physical evidence of the truth. I will share it with you, but you can't tell anyone about it. Make sure no one follows you, especially that woman. The next day, Alessia found herself riding along a narrow, shoulderless road which snaked lazily through the countryside between the regional capital and the village of Stalis, where Angelo lived. He had suggested the route to avoid traffic on the autostrada, telling her that the main roads were too dangerous for scooters. The sun was out, and Alessia was enjoying the ride through vineyards, fields, and ancient stone buildings. She came to a sharp jog in the road where it veered around a farmhouse. She slowed to make the turn, and a car, some European brand she didn't recognize, pulled out onto the road behind her. At first, Alessia didn't give it a thought. Her rented motor scooter hummed as she weaved through the picturesque landscape. Her thoughts were lost in the beauty of the countryside until she glanced in her mirror and saw that the car was following her, a bit too close for her liking. A creeping unease settled in her stomach and her intuition prickled. On impulse, she quickly turned onto a nearby lane to confirm her suspicions. The car followed suit. Adrenaline surging through her veins, she accelerated, the motor scooter's tiny engine growling fiercely beneath her. As if sensing her escape plan, the car gunned its engine, overtaking her with an aggressive surge. Panic gripped Alessia as she fought to maintain control. When the car swerved toward her, she had no choice but to veer off the road. The scooter jolted and bounced, narrowly missing a gnarled tree, then skidded to a halt in a cloud of dust and leaves, throwing Alessia to the ground. Bruised and shaken, she pushed herself up, her eyes stinging with tears. As the dust cleared, she caught a glimpse of the car's driver in the rearview mirror. It was a woman's eyes, and she immediately recognized the cold stare. Determinedly fueled by fear, she pushed through the pain, righted her scooter, and headed back to the regional capital to file a police report. "She was trying to force me off the road," Alessia complained to the Polizia Stradale officer. He listened, occasionally jotting down a few notes. "Without a better description of the car, or photo or license number, there is not much we can do," he explained, "and you are sure it wasn't an accident. Some drivers can be aggressive and get impatient with tourists taking their time. Plus, the roads are much smaller than where you come from, so it's not uncommon for a foreign driver to be involved in an accident." "She intentionally swerved into me. It wasn't an accident," Alessia insisted, trying to contain her anger and frustration as it became clear the police were going to do nothing. "Please remain calm. I just had to confirm. I will file the report, and if anything comes of it, we will let you know." Alessia knew she'd never hear from them. The bus dropped her in the center of Stalis just before noon the next day. Situated at the crest of a hill, surrounded by orchards, it was more a collection of buildings than a town. There was only one cafe, which made it easy for Alessia to find. However, Angela was not there when she arrived. No one spoke English, but Alessia managed to order a coffee and then waited and waited. She was about to give up when a disheveled and frantic-looking Angelo finally appeared. "I'm so sorry that I'm late," he apologized profusely. "I'm glad you waited, but I have bad news. I went to a friend's for dinner last night, and someone broke into my home. They cleaned it out, then started a fire," he cried on the verge of hysterics. Everything I worked on. Gone. It took a moment for the implications to sink in. The video, Alessia gasped. Gone, he confirmed. My father said the gasoline was running down the streets like rainwater. He gagged on the fumes and had to put on a mask to breathe. That's how my father explained it, and the video showed. He stopped in mid-sentence. They've won, Alessia. They've erased the last bit of physical evidence. You'll go to the police, right? Alessia almost pleaded. There'll be fingerprints or something. That would be pointless. Defeated, Angelo dropped his head into his hands. The police can't chase thieves through time. But if we leave out the time travel thing, put our stories together and tell them what is happening. Tell them that someone has been trying to prevent the truth about Rosoli from getting out, and that they'll resort to anything to do it. I mean, someone tried to run me off the road, and now with the theft and the fire. Even as the words left her mouth, Alessia knew how outlandish the whole thing sounded without a shred of proof, and knew that this was the end of the line. He had physical evidence, a video, Alessia told her uncle. Having decided she had hit a dead end and could not achieve anything more by staying, she had stopped in to say goodbye on her way to the airport. His father was an EMR, one of the first on the scene, and took the video on his phone, she added. And you saw this video? Federico asked skeptically. No, I told you it was stolen or burnt in the fire. Either way, it's gone. Federico sighed. I really think you should drop this, Alessia. Go home and forget about what you think your grandma told you that day. But other people remember the fuel trucks as well, she protested. Federico shrugged. I don't know much about psychology, he admitted, but there are people who are convinced that Nelson Mandela passed away in prison decades before his actual death. Maybe what you are experiencing is something like that. Alessia was about to object when her uncle handed her a packet of yellowed envelopes held together with string. What's this? She asked. They're letters, some from your mother, some from the lawyers dealing with your grandmother's estate. I'm not sure why I saved them. There are not that many, but I thought you should have them. Since your mother's death, I've been meaning to send them to you, her uncle apologized. Alessia looked at the packet, examining it like an artifact from some long-dead culture. She never trusted electronic communications, Federico explained. She felt that anything important must be put on paper and sent by registered mail. Please take them. Alessia thanked her uncle, put the packet in her bag, said her goodbyes, then left, trying to convince herself to take his advice and let go of the memory. The plane had been delayed, and Alessia found herself trapped in a crowded and stuffy waiting lounge. Restless, to pass the time, she decided to examine the letters. She dug around in her bag until she found the packet bound together by a frayed string. With a sense of curiosity, she untied the string and carefully withdrew one of the faded envelopes. The paper crackled as she opened it, revealing words from a lawyer addressed to her late mother. The letter began, "My condolences on your mother's passing." Alessia's eyes widened as she read on, her heart racing. That incident involving the 2 fuel trucks was abhorrent, the letter continued, and someone needs to take responsibility. I am contacting you about a possible legal action against the truck's owners. Alessia's breath caught in her throat. The letter was the tangible evidence she had been desperately seeking. She glanced up, her eyes filled with triumph. But her elation was short-lived. A shiver ran down her spine when she noticed the woman from the cenotaph and the street outside the archives seated just 2 rows away. Her predatory gaze locked onto Alessia, sending a chill through her veins. Alessia hastily returned the letter to her bag with trembling hands, hoping to conceal her find. Desperation clawed at her as she scanned the lounge for an escape route. Just as a sense of impending danger overtook her, a faint, acrid odor reached her nose. Her heart raced even faster as she realized the smell was coming from her bag. Panic swept over the lounge as the scent of burning intensified, and alarmed glances were exchanged. Alessia's eyes widened in horror as she looked down at her bag. Smoke billowed from it, and the entire thing burst into flames before she could react. An ear-piercing alarm blared, causing chaos to erupt. Panicked passengers scrambled in all directions, and security guards rushed in to contain the situation. In a state of shock, Alessia stumbled away from her blazing bag, her eyes darting around wildly. Then she spotted the mysterious woman who had calmly risen from her seat, a chilling smile playing across her lips. With a final, unnerving glance, the woman walked away, disappearing in the chaos as Alessia's only evidence turned into ash and smoke.
You can help us continue creating original content twice a month by either heading over to ko-fi.com/makeshiftstories and making a one-time donation, or becoming an ongoing supporter at patreon.com/makeshiftstories. Hey everyone. This is where we recommend new podcasts we think you'd love. This time it's called Looters. It's an actual play podcast, and this month they're doing a Halloween special.
This Halloween, the looters are facing their fears.
Now I have that fear. Now
Dude,
I'm like scared.
I'm realizing I'm
Yeah.
scared of everything.
You just unlocked my new fear.
I live in a constant state of anxieties.
With Deanna Nouveau,
Spiders?
Melinda Macklem,
I feel like I say I'm fine with heights until I actually am up high.
and special guests Tina Wong-Lu
Wait, I'm scared of a head-on collision.
and Madeline Hours.
Episiotomies. I'm so sorry.
But these final girls are dead set on getting out alive.
Never separate from the group.
Don't go upstairs.
No camping.
Join us on October 24th and the 31st for the final girls, a horrifying 2-part special with Game Master Andrew Gaultland.
Boo.
Lock your doors, check your back seats, and tune in to the Looters feed wherever you get your podcasts.
Makeshift Stories is released around the beginning and middle of the month. This month's story was read by Kathleen Connolly and written by Alan V. Hare. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. Audio production and editing by Makeshift Studios. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Links to both are in the show notes. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivative license, which means you are free to share our stories. Just remember to credit us and don't alter anything.